Hello students, you are welcome to this very exciting lesson on writing successful proposals to obtain development funding. You will find this very useful as you go along in your efforts and your attempts to obtain grants and fundings from many different sources across the world. So today we are actually looking at writing successful proposals to obtain development funding. And very quickly, let us look at what Benjamin Franklin said. He said, an investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. So what you are about to experience in this series of lessons is a most incisive, and practically deep understanding of what it takes to write successful proposals to obtain development funding. You will find some of the things you will hear during this training to be quite remarkable. Some of them will surprise you, and I'm sure you will find some of them amazing. But overall, what you are going to experience is that you will be better placed to present proposals in the form of letters, sometimes even verbal proposals, sometimes media proposals, to potential donors who would help you and help your organizations to further your cause in providing the finance you need to arrive at your strategic objectives. So that is the purpose of this course, and it's wonderful to have you with us on it. Let's look quickly at what John Fraser Robinson says about the secrets of effective direct mail. He said something. He said, letters are undoubtedly, undisputedly, and consistently the single strongest weapon in the creative armory. What he's saying essentially is that the letters in either in the written form or on any media presentation platform are actually a very strong weapon, in the hands of a communicator, so to say, or in the hands of a community-based organization, in the hands of a non-profit organization, in the hands of a non-governmental organization, to be able to sell its message. And what he says there is that you should spend lots and lots of creative time on the letter. It will pay you back handsomely. And what John Fraser Robinson is saying essentially is that this is your single most important weapon, because it encapsulates in a very concise sense what your plans are, what your aspirations are, what your strategies are, and the impact you hope to have in the communities in which you are working, either as community-based organizations or as non-profits or as non-governmental organizations. And furthermore, Robert Bly says that writing sales letters is the best education I can recommend for both novice and experienced copywriters alike. No other form of copywriting yields such immediate or such precise feedback on your work. What he's saying essentially is that the response you get, or the responses you get from your letters, from your proposal letters, in effect are a direct result of what you put in the letters. So that is what he means, when he says that no other form of copywriting yields such immediate or precise feedback on your work. So it's important for you to understand that your method, your scope, and more or less the content of your presentation goes a very long way in the responses that you get in return. And very quickly, I would want to say to you that your letter, your fundraising letter, your proposal letter is not an advertising letter. So let's be very clear on this. Lots of CBOs and NGOs make the mistake of writing proposal letters in a manner that seems to suggest that they are trying to advertise their organizations. We need to be very, very clear on this. As much as you need to highlight the important aspects of your organization, you also need to understand that the letter in itself is not an advertising letter. So, William Benbach says that you must be able to connect with people's hearts and minds through what you say and how you say it. So, insight into human nature is the key to the communicator's skill. For whereas the writer is concerned with what he puts into his writing, the communicator is concerned with what the reader gets out of it. He therefore becomes a student of how people read or listen. Basically, what William Benbach is saying here is that you need to be a communicator and not just a writer. In putting across your proposals, you must be able to connect with the minds of people. You need to be able to connect with their hearts through what you say and how you say it. So these are the technicalities that we're going to be looking at in this course. How are you going to be able to make your letters in such a way or in such a manner that you can connect with the hearts of your potential sponsors, you can connect with their minds, and immediately elicit the proper response that you're looking out for to be able to do what you want to do for your organization. And furthermore, rather than just being writers, we have to be communicators. So in the guise of being communicators, that is how we are able to connect with the minds and with the hearts of the people that our letters are addressed to. And let us look very quickly at what Peter Drucker, who is popularly known as the founder of modern management, what he has to say concerning how you relate with your potential customer. So let us look at your customer to be your potential donor, so to say. So reading from what Peter Drucker said, he said, a customer only wants to know, that is your potential donor, only wants to know what the product or service will do for them tomorrow. So essentially, what your donor wants to understand is what your relationship with their organization will do for them tomorrow. What your relationship with the organization will do for your target audience tomorrow. So essentially, that is what they want to know. So they are looking at impact more than anything. So when you want to talk about what you are going to be able to do for your customer or for your intended on the audience, then you must be talking about impact as much as is possible. He says, and all that they are interested in are their own values, their own wants, and their own reality. For this reason alone, any serious attempt to state what our business is must start with the customer, their realities, their situation, their expectations, and their values. So basically, you must be able to mirror effectively what the realities of your potential donors are, what their situation is, what their expectations are, and what their values are. All these are aspects you must learn to investigate that by going on their websites, by doing library research, by doing all kinds of online research. And when you do that effectively, what you are going to be able to do is that you are going to be able to identify what their realities are, what their situations are, their expectations and their values. And you don't restrict yourself only to the donors. You also go further to understand what the realities of your target market is basically. So you're going to your donors, you're approaching them for money, or you're approaching them for assistance, or you're approaching them for equipment to be able to use the same in your target or your target community or your target population. Now, what are the realities of your target population? What is their situation? What are their expectations and their values? All these must be put in clear perspective as you do your presentation or your proposal letter to the potential donors. So it's great to know that, like Peter Drucker said, that is where you start from. You start from that point because your customer is more interested in their own values, their own wants, and their own realities. So whenever you deal with counterpart organizations, whenever you deal with any kind of group, to which you want to make a success at any presentation you make to them, ensure that you mirror their values, ensure that you mirror their aspirations, ensure that you mirror their expectations, ensure that you mirror also their realities. All this put together will essentially put you in good stead and will give you an audience anytime you want to make a presentation to them. Now, your fundraising proposition should always be about their wants and not your needs. For example, if you want to help children in Ghana to access potable water, you should not say, help us. Rather say, help a child access potable water at, say, 10 Ghana cedis a day. That is a better way of putting your proposal across, to your potential audience, to, a group of people who have the capacity to fund you for what you want to do. It should never be about you, the organization that is trying to raise the financing for the work, but it should always be about your target population. And your target population in this case are the children who need water. So don't say help us, but rather say help a child access potable water at, for example, 10 Ghana cedis a day. That is what, is the proper approach to use, at that point. Very quickly, we should just look at, what actually is a grant, and a grant is an award that is given in the form of goods, services, and cash. And a grant proposal is a formal proposal submitted to a government or civilian entity that outlines a proposed project and shows budgetary requirements and requests monetary assistance in the form of a grant. Your proposal explains your idea in detail. Now, the grant is what your organization is looking for. As a community-based organization, as an NGO, as a non-profit organization, what your organization is actually looking for is a grant. And that grant, you need to understand that you need to do a formal proposal which will be submitted, sometimes to government, sometimes to civilian entities. But that proposal must clearly outline what the proposed project is. And you should also show budgetary requirements, and at the same time, you must ask for monetary assistance. That is what actually makes a grant. So your proposal, as it were, explains your idea in detail. So your proposal is to get a grant. And that grant must be very clear on the outlines of the project. It must be very clear on the budgetary requirements. And you also must do, a very concise ask. Now, since the point of a grant award is impact rather than money, the real point of a grant proposal is to rally the necessary resources to help the non-profit fulfill its purpose. I want to repeat that. That since the point of a grant award is impact rather than money, the real point of a grant proposal is to rally the necessary resources to help the non-profit fulfill its purpose. And that on its own, immediately tells where the emphasis and the focus should be on. And where the emphasis and the focus should be it's not the money that the organization is after, but it's rather the impact that you desire to make as a result of the funding you will receive. So it's a good thing to always lay emphasis on the impact. In your asking for financial help, financial aid, do that very clearly, but be very lavish in explaining what your impact is, or what your impact, is supposed to be. And if you have historical impact, within the confines of the work you've done before, it will also be wonderful for you, to highlight, the previous impact. So, what is crucial, basically, is the impact which your organization is going to make upon your population, or your target population for that matter, using the resources that you raise from potential donors. So the grant is essentially a tool that non-profits use to address important issues within their communities. So non-profits use grants, and they use financial aid and funding from donor bodies, some from government bodies, but the basic and the intention of such funding is to address important issues within communities. And these issues range, very wide, some in education, some in water, some in hygiene, some in climate change, some, as many as the current SDG goals, as it were, of the United Nations, especially talking about the attainment points in 2030. All the goals, are clearly enumerated and highlighted in various communities, and the kind of work that community-based organizations are doing, non-profits are doing, non-governmental organizations are essentially to meet these goals. Okay. In preparing your grant proposal, or your grant letter, or your funding letter, by whatever name or means you wish to address or call it, you need to know that you must, as an organization, look for sources of information for potential donors. How do you get these donors? How are you able to find out which and where you can get specific donors that will help your cause? Your online databases will be a very, very important source of getting donors. And what I mean by your online databases is you can Google or search on the internet for potential donors for your area of activities. It's good to go on the internet and search specifically for those group of people. And when you do that, you'll get an array, sometimes even more than you can manage, of potential sources for funding to assist whatever you want to do. LinkedIn provides another such source. You could go on LinkedIn and research. On some occasions in Facebook, on Facebook you can get some. Then, and of course, the old traditional libraries also present a platform, or rather an environment, where you can very clearly identify fund donors and sources of help to the non-profit organizations. Then if you go on the websites of corporates, you will also observe that in some instances, most corporates around the world advertise their social responsibility aspects, or rather their social responsibility work, in either their communities or even communities outside their countries. So at such a point, it's wise to, search as many websites as possible of corporates to also see if you can get donors amongst them. Then, of course, ask amongst your colleagues. Your colleagues will also be able to give you such information. And when you go also on community giving programs, you would also be able to effectively source information for potential donors. But again, I must add this. There are specific organizations that provide on a regular basis sources of funding. Sources of funding. So when you go on the net, you will be able to research for such groups and such organizations. And some of them, what you need is a subscription. On getting that subscription, you will then be able to, get on the list and be receiving, a very regular provision of information that you require, sometimes to assist you to make your applications for funding. Now, let's talk about the very crucial aspect of obtaining grants from either the government or from donor organizations or from any other source of funding that you wish to get grants. Grants actually are given by organizations. Now, in doing that, you must develop a fundraising plan. And your fundraising plan should be able to determine very closely the strategies you want to put in place to obtain the grants with the desired impact for your target population. So develop a fundraising plan and then use various methods to obtain grant sources. Like we said in the previous slide, you need to research on the internet, you need to research in the libraries, you need to research through certain search engines and through certain social media platforms like LinkedIn, like WhatsApp, like Facebook, and the rest of it. Actually, there's WhatsApp fundraising now, but you can research through any of these platforms to obtain grant sources. It's important that you have your grant sources in view. Then when you get a potential source of grant, what you should do is to request for an application form, a format, or a template. Some organizations might not have templates, they might not have specific application forms, but they will always have a format. So it's important for you to do that as a third step. You request for an application form or a format or template. And please, as a very crucial reminder or knowledge you must have is that do not create huge proposals that donors may not be interested in. So it's important for you to understand, research your donors properly, and know the kind of levels of fundings that they give, the kinds of amounts of resources or equipment that they give, so that you do not present proposals that are outside their scope. So it's important not to create huge proposals that fund donors may not be interested in, and do not go straight to proposal writing if you can first set up a meeting with a potential corporate, government, or individual donor. Very, very important. It's noteworthy that if you have the opportunity to set up a meeting with a potential donor, it's usually wonderful to use that opportunity. Because when you do that, what you are doing essentially is that you are getting an insight into what the specifics are, what the requirements are, what the modus operandi will be, and that in itself will give you a head start in the kind of request you want to make for funds, to have an impact on your target population. Then your proposal should include a review process. Your proposal should also be sustainable. The proposal should be sustainable in the sense that it should not be a proposal which will be a one-off. There should be some form of continuity. There should be some form of space to continue your program so that you don't end it abruptly. So in making your proposal, you must always make allowance for that. There must be, an allowance of activity that tapers until the next cycle of activity start. So it should be sustainable, and the impact and the outcomes must be clearly stated. Your donor, your funder, your grant giver wants to know the impact and the outcomes of whatever you want to do. They want to know the number of children whose lives are going to be saved. They want to know the percentage by which infant mortality or maternal mortalities will come down. They want to know, the statistics of, how much potable water is going to get across to the population. They want to know, in very specific terms, what your education intervention will do in the community. I mean, how many more children are going to access education, due to the work you're doing. So the impact and the outcomes must be clearly stated. The outcomes essentially are the change in lifestyle. They are the very clear change between when your organization got involved in your project or with your target population, and then what has now finally come out of it. So you go on to your ninth point should be the problem you intend to solve must be clearly understood and explained. You must understand the problem you're trying to solve, and you must be able to, your organization must be able to clearly, explain it to the understanding of your donor or your funder. Now, the cause of the problem must also be clearly enumerated. It's sometimes worrying that community-based organizations, non-profits, and non-governmental organizations seek to solve problems that they do not actually know the origins, and they don't understand what leads to the problems in the first place. For example, a problem could be cultural. If as a non-profit you don't understand the cultural implications of certain problems you observe in the community, and you go about trying to solve them, you will only compound the situation, because you're not solving those problems from a standpoint of knowledge, or for a standpoint of understanding of the issues that are involved. So the cause of the problem must be clearly enumerated. You must know the cause of the problem. If your organization does not know the cause of the problem, it's required that you go to investigate the cause of the problem. What actually causes, a problem where, children, become, let's say, for example, child soldiers, where children become, they get out of school and they're on the streets hawking. You need to clearly identify, what has made these children available for such situations to happen in their lives. So, for example, it could just be something that is as clear as teenage pregnancies. Teenage pregnancies could just be, one reason why there are so many children available on the streets. So, anyway, you just need to look at what exactly could be the cause of the problem. Now, you also have to note the effects of the problem on society. These have to be clearly outlined when interacting with your funders or your potential funders. Now, identify your prospects and test your eligibility. Then you go on to rate your prospects and check your check compatibility before you now interact with your potential donors. So in obtaining grants, we need to look at very closely these points. Altogether, they are 14 in number, but there are points which you can actually take down gradually, and in writing your proposal letter, you must be able to put those together and then do the proposal letter. So quickly, let me just do a rehash of this. Develop your fundraising plan, use various methods to obtain grant sources, request for an application form, format to template. Do not create huge proposals that donors may not be interested in. Do not go straight to proposal writing. If you can first set up a meeting with a potential corporate, government, or individual donor, and your proposal should include a review process. Let your proposal be sustainable. Let the impacts and the outcomes be clearly stated. And the proposal you intend to solve, let it be clearly understood and explained. The cause of the problem must also be clearly enumerated. The effects of the problem on society must also be clearly outlined. Identify your prospects, test your eligibility, rate your prospects, check your compatibility, and interact with your potential donors. So far, we've been able to put what a proposal concept is and some essential aspects of obtaining grants. We'll be your way again to continue from where we stopped today. Have a great day.